turns and goes back to his seat. There's still some murmuring among the gallery behind you. And the Empress leans over and whispers something to Cass as well. Unless any of you have lip reading. And the one of you who I think did is gone.
I think so too.
Mm-hmm. So unfortunately, that's not going to be something you can pick up on, but something
I have
short.
Observant.
Yeah, I think Lena has the lip reading.
If you can see a creature's mouth while it is
Well.
speaking a language you can understand, you can interpret what it is saying.
Maybe it was you and Nakrel then. Okay.
Yeah. Okay.
I want to interpret it. I want to try.
Roll me a perception check with advantage.
Ooh. Okay.
I'm going to give
She's
the
like-
off chance that you're too focused on the trial proceedings to pick up on the fact that they had this exchange, because it's short, but I'll give you advantage.
23.
You don't see what happens. What the Empress whispers to Cass is, I don't like this. It's too easy.
Okay. And
Cass just kind of gives her a nod, doesn't say anything in response. You can see her hand sort of goes from being near her weapon to instinctually kind of just clutching the hilt of it. She's not pulling it or anything, but
yeah.
like that's kind of like her, without thinking about it, she just kind of like goes to that, like something tangible to hold on to.
Yep. I'm going to lean over to the closest person to me. I don't know who that is. Who am I sitting next to?
Everybody's pretty much next to you.
Okay, I'm just going to lean over and whisper, I was able to interpret what the Empress was saying over there. She doesn't like it. It's too easy.
Yeah, welcome to the trial.
Should any of us consider perhaps staying outside? Keeping an eye on things?
I don't think so. Let's keep watching for now. I can't imagine he hasn't thought of that, and whatever the case may be, I think it's going to be best if we're together.
Well, I agree. I don't intend to leave Rezia or the Empress in here alone, but if you're all worried, another set of eyes on the outside wouldn't hurt.
They announced for the courtroom that there will be a brief 15-minute recess. So people will start to rise out of their seats, having been in here for the better part of like 2 hours. Like, we shortened some of that, but the fact that you can see how long we've been recording in the bottom right, it's actually not much of a stretch. So it's a chance for to take a recess, for people to stretch their legs. They are allowed to go out in the lobby, but not permitted to leave, because they will not be allowed re-entry if they do so, having been screened at the door. But they are allowed to, head back out. They're also not allowed to go up towards the front, mill around, interact with anybody. Faust is not allowed to leave, and Cavis has his men sort of just sitting in proximity to him. Not moving over next to him, but just keeping an eye on him. The Empress gets up and leaves the room back towards another exit that nobody else seems to have access to but her. Leaves the chambers for a moment, and you guys are welcome to go out into the lobby if you'd like to. I will tell you that, like Phoenix Wright, there's likely to be a scene out there if you choose to do so.
I mean, we have to go in that case.
Does Rezia leave?
She does not. She appears to be content to just stay in the chamber for the time being. She's concerned, but she hasn't picked up on the fact that the two of them were whispering. Could you turn the fan on, please, by the way? I just noticed it's warm. Does not appear to have picked up on the fact that something may have been off. It seems like it would be normal for the Empress to leave at this time anyways, in between stuff. But she seems content to stay put for the time being.
Well, Tessian will stay in there with it, but he does want to kind of motion to Isaac and pull him just aside and just ask him, Isaac, is it worth mentioning the guns you have and what your father was doing with them, the sort of research he was doing? Do you think that might sway the testimony at all? The sort of danger he could have potentially,
I don't think it hurts. Why don't we ask Rezia what she thinks during the break? So, like now, I guess, but I wasn't... And that sucks, because there's a scene outside, but I was just going to say I wasn't planning on leaving anyway, so...
I'll go outside.
Okay.
I can go
Is
with-
Cavis Yeah, is Cavus still in the room as well?
Cavus appears to be leaving the room as well.
Okay.
Maybe the scene is with him.
I'll go with Karash then. We can go
Leading
up.
the witness, Your Honor.
Testify. So I guess you can have that conversation with Rezi on the inside, Isaac. If you're staying as well, right?
Yeah, I would let Tessian. I would go with Tessian, but I would let him lead it.
I mean, yeah. Did it look like Cavus was leaving the room? Like, did he walk past us out, or was he going out another exit?
He's walking past you up the aisle to the lobby, and does sort of give you a look as he does so.
Tessian will actually turn to Isaac and say, "Perhaps you should talk to Cavus about it. He'd be the one that would present it, and you're the one most familiar with it."
Faust has not left.
No, he is not permitted to leave.
I don't want to take my eyes off him. Why don't you tell Cavus and I'll tell Rezia then?
Keep an eye on her, and Tessian will stand up and follow Cavus out.
Okay.
Which one do you want to do first, Gross?
Let's do Rezia first.
Okay. Excuse me, Rezia, unless she just sees me coming and...
She's at this point, there's very few of you left in the room. The majority of people have gotten up and left, the nobles especially eager to escape the cramped space and go mill about themselves and get refreshments or whatever it is nobles do when they're at the halftime entertainment of their particular trial. So there's a handful of hangers-on, none of them really within earshot, and then just the men who are still, the Crusaders still watching Faust, and Cass is also still in the room as well.
How are you feeling about everything?
She says, well, I had talked to Cass and even the Empress a little bit, so I knew that we had a lot of evidence in our favor, but seeing it all laid out like this at once, it's particularly damning, isn't it?
I mean, he's clearly up to something, yes. I want to reiterate something that I've said before. I think you should strongly consider altering your judgment or maybe proposing a different sentence. I think this has been too easy, and by all accounts we're headed toward a guilty verdict, and I think that's going to put him in a corner. I think if we lighten the sentence, he may play along longer, and we might find out more about what is going on. We have some pieces of the puzzle, but clearly gaping holes. We don't have a clear picture of what's going on at all right now.
How would we sentence him then?
Whatever you did before. Prison time. Life sentence for now. I don't think it matters. Just death penalty. He'll feel like there's nothing to lose.
It also gives him the opportunity to continue what he's doing.
Not from prison. Surely he can't have that much power. I think he would comply. I think we could convince him. At least until we have the full picture.
So you think if he's facing death, that he'll lash out, but if we keep him in servitude indefinitely, he'll just be okay with it?
I don't think he'll see it like that, and we both know prison for nobles is not as oppressive. We're not talking about a hole in the floor. We're talking about accommodations many would find an upgrade from where they are now, but it keeps them on a leash. And I think it's the only chance we have of him not making matters worse. Don't tell me you think that this is going according to plan. It's too easy. Correct?
Well, perhaps he wasn't counting on you finding the evidence that you did. I mean, I don't disagree. I am concerned about what he will present in his own defense here. When we heard he was going to represent himself a few days ago, the first thought was that there was going to be some trick up his sleeve, but he also could have resisted arrest when you first got him. He would know better than almost anyone what the weight of his crimes would bring down upon him, and that allowing himself to be captured could lead to this very outcome. So I ask, why would he only lash out now?
Because now his life is on the line. He has nothing left to lose.
His life was forfeit when we first brought him here. If he was familiar with the evidence that you could have compiled against him, then what would be stopping him from attacking you when you first cornered him with it, or escaping? The Empress tells me he has access to powerful teleportation magics at the very least. He could easily have escaped your clutches when the first chance presented itself.
I think he has a trump card that we don't know about, and you said it yourself. If he had access to the teleportation, why not use it? This is all, I don't want to say necessarily part of his plan, but here's what I'll tell you. He expects to come back in, and you render a guilty verdict. And that will put into motion whatever the rest of his plan is. I think consider it, that's all. If your counsel doesn't agree, then that's fine. I just hoped to give you another angle to think about.
She puts a hand on your shoulder. She says, I understand this must be difficult, but I agree with my sister. I don't think this is a risk we can take. She's looked into the source of his magic to a greater extent to try and understand more about what he's capable of. And it appears he has the ability to change people's memories. Not just to compel them to do things on a short-term basis, but to change their very understanding of events that have happened, sometimes years ago. All it'll take is one flawed guard rotation when we're watching him, and we may never have a chance to capture him again. Is the risk of him becoming at large again with the connections that he has worth the extra information we might glean? I'll grant you, it could be. But one chance for him to slip through our fingers, and there probably won't be another.
Jason's camera is frozen. Looking very incredulous.
Yes,
by the way.
very smug.
Permanently. I would say I understand, but if he dies, all of his secrets die with him.
She says, you might be surprised. There are still other ways.
To get information from the dead?
Yes.
Are we talking about necromancy? Would the Empress sanction such a tactic?
Oh no, nothing so taboo, but at the very least, please understand that while your father is quite powerful, so too is the Empress. She has tools at her disposal that may still be of use here. Now, she couldn't compete with him if they were ever to do battle of some kind, but that's the exact reason we're here, is to avoid something like that would put her at risk. But that said, there are not many more gifted magicians on this continent than her.
I have a friend who, look, he just might know the answer to some things that mean a lot to me, sure, but to the country as well. And I'm just asking you to consider, that's all. You will do what you think is right.
I will speak to her. Your words do carry some weight, but when I briefly talked to the Empress this morning, she was resolute in the possibility. She obviously has to hear this out as fairly as possible. But she has concluded that if he were found guilty over the course of this trial, that she will take his head if she must. I will take this break to speak with her momentarily if I can, but I would not hold your breath.
Okay.
And then so she actually does now leave the box.
She's like,
and heads back to the area behind the ornate seat where Cass is and heads off into that room. So you have at least compelled her to go talk to her because she was not going to leave.
excellent.
That means something. Rezia will remember that. On the exterior, there's a lot of buzz outside. Now no longer worried about the repercussions of being yelled at for speaking out of turn or making a bunch of noise in the courtroom. A lot of people that were having, somewhat loud conversations when you first entered the courtroom are now out in the lobby having quite loud conversations, just sort of in this disbelief of like, can you believe she said that? And I can't believe he didn't try and fight back more when they said this. And, that sort of talk is sort of what's kind of buzzing in the background as you walk out into the lobby. And moments later, well, actually, no, Cavis was first. As you make your way out, Cavis kind of approaches the three of you as you come out. Says, "It is good to see you again. I'm glad you're here. It's reassuring to have more allies in that room."
Cavis, I wanted to ask you about something. I recognize that the bulk of your time has passed, but I was wondering if it would be prudent, perhaps, of us. And he kind of leans in a little bit, just so like people don't hear a lot of it. But he says, Isaac's weapons were made by Faust Dryden, and their nature is dangerous, not just for the lethality of them, but their ability to steal memories, thoughts, things of the sort. Such devices are certainly damning in their own right. If Faust, would it be prudent of us to provide those as evidence of the perhaps questionable nature, or at the very least potentially questionable nature of his aims? Stockpiling weapons is one thing, but these seem particularly foul in their own unique way.
You can see him pondering this for a moment. Seems unexpected to him. He says, "We do have a preponderance of evidence, in my opinion, but anything extra just to make sure I don't think would hurt. If Isaac is willing to speak on it, I could put him on the stand after the defense has a chance. If it's entered as new evidence, we do have an opportunity to present further testimony. Of course, that'll also mean his father has the opportunity to question him as well."
Well, I don't want to speak for Isaac, but I am assured that if it meant, well, if it meant getting his father to speak, giving his father a chance to explain himself, he would be more than willing to take the stand.
Gives you kind of a thoughtful nod. "Well, do me this favor then." Well, if he would first ask you where he is, you'd say still in the courtroom.
Yes.
When we get back in there, just double check with him. Make absolutely certain. I don't want to put someone on the stand who is not 100% behind it. But if he is, just pass me a note, and I will take care of the rest.
I will.
I was sort of hoping to avoid putting him on the stand for some reasons, but it would also be valuable in some ways as well. I don't know. I mean, if he's already in the room, it can't present that much extra danger, can it?
You would hope not.
He kind of looks over the three of you. He's like, I don't know. I mean, I pride myself on being thorough and prepared, but even in my wildest dreams, I couldn't have thought we would have this compelling of a case, nor that he wouldn't have pushed back more.
That is the concerning part. I think we are all in agreement of that, and the Empress as well, from the looks of it. And he kind of nods to Lena. Any idea what he could be up to?
I wish I knew. We were so particular about how we prepared this area for anything that would potentially happen with his magic, but I don't know. I mean, I trust the only people who have weapons in the room, without question. We wouldn't have allowed anybody else in if we thought they were a dangerous element, and I thought perhaps there might be a trick up his sleeve with Whitwer Thorogood, given their past connections, but that went smoothly. And I thought perhaps he would try to hit us with some kind of surprise, some kind of unexpected testimony, but even then I don't know what it could be that would overcome this mountain of evidence we have against him. And if he can't use magic to aid him in doing so, I honestly don't know what he has up his sleeve.
Well, I will say this, Cavis, and I don't know how much of it you want to pass on to your guards, but we know the man has been stockpiling weapons of the mundane variety, especially gunpowder. The most worrying thing about all this to me was the many different looks he was giving our good friend Whitver. He was looking at him as a man would when he knew that they would be seeing each other again, and he wanted Thorogood to know that when they met next, there would be a price to pay. which leads me to believe that Faust thinks he's getting out of this. Or at least suspects he might. Doesn't seem the kind of man to frivolously intimidate people if you couldn't back it up. I'm sure you've done your best, but you may want to have your men do a sweep. Something, explosives, anything. Could very well have slipped past their guard.
He thinks on it for a second and kind of nods. He says, well, I had my men sort of watching for anything in particular like that, and the Empress instructed the Cabal to be quite thorough on their searches as people were entering, but you never know. And hell, perhaps it's some kind of weapon that could be brought in parts and assembled later. I mean, we've really tried to foresee any possible outcomes here, but with a man as shrewd as this, I think anything's possible. So maybe I'll have them redouble their efforts.
Is Sophia out here at all?
She is not. It seems like
Okay.
none of the witnesses are out here. It seems like they were brought in and then taken away somewhere so that they would not be on the vicinity, just in case for their own safety.
Okay, I thought as much, but I wanted to double check.
Yeah.
Okay.
That way there's no fear of reprisal from anybody else, you know.
Yeah.
They were all, I mean, Cavis can sort of explain this, but they were all escorted off just to make sure for their safety. That, again, because like as soon as they step outside the building, magic could be fair game again.
Yeah.
They were all taken off the premises with an escort just to be safe.
How close is Waychester to the sea?
I mean, you basically rode out to Fort Cross, and that's about the closest point. I could double check the map to make sure that's 100% true. But
Is
I
it
think,
like it's pretty far then?
It is hours away? Yes.
Oh,
It's landlocked. It's not. I mean, there's a river that goes past it.
okay. Just curious.
I think.
Yeah, it took you like 3 or 4 hours by cart to go to Fort Cross, as I recall.
I'm staring at my dad, and I have a thought, and I would like to go find Cavis myself.
Okay.
I was not going to leave until I had a thought,
And after minutes have passed, I had a thought.
and now I've had a thought based on some of the evidence that was brought forth.
And you can even do it such that like the doors of the courtroom are still open, so you can do it such that you walk out to the lobby and still sort of have eyes on him. Now, obviously, you're going to be further away and not see as
Sure.
many details and stuff, but you can at least be like, I can see he's still in the room. You know, like it's not like you're abandoning a line of sight. There's probably an inlet a little bit closer than Fort Cross, but even so, it's at least 2.5 hours by cart away from any meaningful water sources. And there's a river, but even that's another hour or maybe a little more south and southwest of the city. So no direct water routes to Waychester, no. Anyways, you get up and leave. You join the others out there. They've had this conversation to this point, and now Isaac steps outside and joins you as well.
Isaac, where's Rezia?
She's actually back talking with the Empress right now. Cavis, I wanted to have a discussion. I don't think we should continue here. This doesn't feel right at all. And I know what a wrench this... That should be a tool, but back then. This puts
Anachroschism.
into these plans and these trial and this process. But this doesn't feel right. And it occurs to me that, thinking, well, what could he possibly do to get out? We discussed it in the courtroom. We have the blueprints for such a mechanism. And that's just one option that we know of right now. Portable mana cannon set up anywhere close to the city, aimed for the courthouse or nearby, could create enough of a disruption for him to get free.
Where would we hold the trial then?
Somewhere. Don't tell me. Don't tell anyone. Don't let him plan for it.
I mean, Tessian does lean over to Cavis and say, oh God. Lady What's-Her-Faces. Oh no. She had the safe.
Lady, what's her face?
Lorraine DeGrey?
Yeah.
DeGrey. I was like, Lady Grey? Yeah. He just says, Lady DeGrey's vault is magically sealed, but we'd have to get him there.
Or any other place like it. The less people know, the better.
He says, I don't know how we would maintain an anti-magic field while transporting him somewhere. It takes considerable concentration from powerful mages in the Cabal to even keep this up at this building as it is. And unless a room has been specifically constructed for it, we risk a ton moving him right now. I concede that if a mana cannon had been finished, it could be used in this situation, but how would we ever transport him somewhere else?
I don't know. I don't know, but maybe I'm being paranoid.
I think it's a good idea, Isaac, but I think perhaps for better or for worse, this is where things are going to have to go down.
And the Empress is aware of the risks. Now, obviously we're doing everything in our power to keep her safe whatsoever, but for her to pass ultimate judgment on Faust Dryden, she's going to have to be in the room with him somewhere. Now, we can mitigate some of the other outside risks, like you mentioned. I'm not saying it's foolish to consider it, but at a certain point, I talked to her at length about this to make sure, and she is resigned to do what is necessary here.
Now, Isaac, on the topic of doing what is necessary, I ran the idea of bringing up your weapons to Cavus, and he's willing to put you on the stand if you feel you're ready to take it, and potentially have your father cross-examine you.
Me on the stand. Yes, I think that would work. I'll do it.
Travis kind of nods. He said, well, I was going to double check for sure, but...
Even if for no other reason, then it buys a little more time for you to reconsider. I don't know what the logistics would be. You bring up a great counterpoint, but I am more afraid now than at any point before that... not just him escaping. I fear for the lives of everyone in this courtroom.
Here's the one thing I can tell you, at least from my conversations with the Empress. We don't really know exactly how this would interact, but the mana cannon's based on siphoning mana off of individuals using it or surrounding it. So it shouldn't be able to activate from inside the building, and if it were fired at the building, the anti-magic field should repel it to some extent, especially a smaller version that's less powerful. Now, if the anti-magic field were to be disabled, we could have a considerable amount of risk, but that would also be true of Faust himself. I do think we should be careful, especially because it could be used to breach the exterior of the building in some way, but I don't think it could be used to attack all the people inside of it.
Okay, that's a lot of shoulds, but I hope you're right.
He kind of gives you an exasperated sigh, not with you, but just kind of like the situation. He's like, believe me, it's been 2 weeks of a lot of shoulds and what-ifs, and quite frankly, I like dealing with logistics that are real, not imagined, but we haven't had much of a choice here, I suppose.
Okay, well, how does this work? Just call me down and I'll...
You'll be expected to tell the truth under oath like the others as you've seen them sworn in, and answer my questions as honestly as possible. Perhaps in the couple of moments we have left, you should tell me what I should be asking about. Tessian spoke of the weapons to some degree, but if there are particular bits of testimony you want me to get out there, I need to ask you questions that'll lead you to those answers. So we can touch base here briefly. You can give me a quick rundown, and then you have to prepare yourself for whatever questions your father might throw at you, because I can't anticipate those.
I'll be fine with those, but my question is, am I to be the last witness?
I'm going to have to confer with Faust Dryden himself. Usually in these situations, when a new evidence is presented, we'll either do it before or after the defense has their chance, and he will have as much of a say as I do as far as when. He cannot stop the testimony from happening if it has new evidence that is deemed worthy, but he can decide if he wants it to go on before or after he does his own line of questioning on his own witnesses. So,
okay, good. I just think it's important that he be questioned as well. I think he needs an opportunity to state his side of the story. That's the wrong phrase. I want him to fill in some of the gaps that we have, and I hope in pursuit of the truth that he has the opportunity to do so.
He says, I think that should be possible. For one thing, he'll have the chance to speak himself, both in his capacity as counsel for himself. He can make an opening or a closing statement, and he may also sort of embellish things as he goes along asking questions. As you know, I mean, we get a certain liberty with how we can ask them. We can bring up little facts or little twists in there, one of which I got called on back in the first part of this, but even so, I have a feeling that as loquacious as your father is, he's not going to resist the opportunity to make a speech in front of a platform like this.
Agreed.
Now, how it'll fill in the gaps, I don't know. I do have the right to question him myself if I deem it necessary, but it's a little bit trickier when he's representing himself. Instead of having his own defense counsel that might ask questions of him and then give me the opportunity to ask follow-up questions, he's going to be just producing his own testimony as he goes along, basically. So it'll be a little bit trickier, but we do have some things in place to help with it.
Just try, if you can. There's more to his story than we're getting today, and I know he has not been forthcoming, clearly. But let's just do our best to make him realize the gravity of the situation.
He nods. He says, I'll do the best I can. The Empress placed her faith in me, and I would not let her down without giving it everything I had as well. But we'll see what happens. And he will go over with you on the side sort of a couple of things that you might want to talk about. We'll do that off air just to save time. But as a voice calls out in the courtroom to return to the proceedings with the break being over, everybody in there starts to shuffle back in. The noble's not in a particular hurry, but they're also not lacking for time because they're also super interested in what's happening. So they dilly-dally a little, but they're in time for the proceedings to continue. And that's where we're going to leave off. Next time, the defense will present its case, and a verdict may be rendered on the Anachroschism.
May be rendered.